Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Welcome back to the program. Sterling Fox with you this Sunday morning, talking family law with our guests from Westside Family Law in Vancouver. Mark Perry and Anna Perry are partners in Westside Family Law. We're talking about the Divorce Act and the Family Law Act, the fact that the dissolution of a marriage or a relationship is kind of complicated by the fact that it's under both federal and provincial jurisdiction. There have been changes to the law in the last couple of years in BC, and of course there are societal changes going on as the law in many cases struggles to keep up with it all. Anna, I just a curiosity question. We're talking about the divorce rate at 50%, really hasn't changed a lot in decades and so on. What has changed in Canada, one small dynamic that has changed, is the nature of couples getting married. For example, it's legal in British Columbia, and has been for a while, for same-sex couples to get married. So I would assume, therefore, in some cases, unfortunately, same-sex couples probably get divorced too, right?
That's correct. We had same-sex couples together under a common law relationship prior to the ability to get married.
Right.
So it isn't new in that sense, except now they come under the auspices of the Divorce Act as well.
I see. And so, therefore, are treated like any other couple going through the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
No rule changes, one would think, Mark?
None whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, one interesting phenomenon that's happened a couple times in the last couple months is we've had people approach us who have been married here in British Columbia as a same-sex couple.
Right.
But they reside somewhere else.
Oh, they would live somewhere where they couldn't get married.
Where they
so
could
they
not
came
get
here
married.
to get married.
Yes.
Okay, right.
But then, very unfortunately, their relationships come to an end.
Right.
And we have law here in British Columbia and in most jurisdictions around the world where the courts will only entertain a divorce where people reside where the court is.
Oh.
So they're kind of stuck in a bit of a limbo. So for example,
it was okay for them to come here and get married. That's not a terribly complex process.
That's
is
right.
It?
But let's pick for example Wisconsin. That was one of the files just recently. A couple from Wisconsin came to Vancouver, got married.
Right.
3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
Now, but they reside in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to end their marriage. Wisconsin doesn't, and I'm picking that as, it may not be true anymore. But,
right.
But I understood Wisconsin doesn't entertain same-sex marriages, so therefore they do not have divorces.
So so their instinct, Anna, would be to come back to where they got hitched in the first place and have it undone by basically the same process.
That's right.
And that's not possible in BC.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people think that they have to do that. If they got married in Italy, they should go get divorced in Italy.
Right.
And of course, you get married where you live. The reason for that is you have to establish residency, and it's so that people don't go to jurisdictions and just get a divorce off the cuff within a very short time, and a fake divorce too. For example, if you could file and serve for divorce anywhere, then there's no safeguards against you kind of secretly getting a divorce from the other party. One of the criteria is that you serve the other party with notice for divorce.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we have those safeguards within our jurisdiction about filing the certificate of marriage first, proving you're actually married. And in one case I have that was rather difficult because they'd been married in this tiny hillside village in Italy. And they had to go, one of them had to go back to this tiny village in Italy to get proof that they were married. But it cost quite a lot of money, and it took a couple of weeks because it truly was a remote hillside village, and you have to go and get the mayor out of bed to come down and make an official record of the marriage registry in that little tiny church. So that was one example. But coming back to why we need to establish residency is exactly that people will be known in the jurisdiction.
Sure.
And so you just have to establish some degree of residency. And here it's 12 months. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the parties, not both of the parties.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right.
All right. So one of them could
But for
have.
the same-sex couple who have come here because, Vancouver or British Columbia allows them to get married,
Right.
and then they go back to where they're from, they're kind of in a bit of a limbo.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And again, probably those conversations. Now, we were talking about prenups just a few minutes ago, and regardless of who's getting married, those sorts of looking down the road after the glow fades a little conversations
Absolutely.
may have been beneficial.
Absolutely. Right.
What's the difference between divorce, Anna, and annulment?
Oh, well, annulment is simply that the certain aspects of the marriage it wasn't perfected.
Okay.
So let's say we got, this actually happened, a couple got married, and I'm not certain what went wrong, but immediately after the marriage ceremony, they parted company.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
They left each other at the church?
Yeah,
Well, now that we're married, see ya.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I think they made it to the hotel, and that was as far as they got.
Wow.
I had that same situation just maybe about a year ago. And you and I were talking about people coming in with a lot of emotion. So
Sure.
I had someone come phoning and leaving multiple messages on a Monday morning, needed to see me at 9 o'clock, and they were related to an older client. And they had a wedding ceremony at Whistler on Saturday night, paid for by the bride's family.
Sure.
With all kinds of people brought in. And they had a big fight after the wedding ceremony between the bride and the groom.
Oh, boy.
So the bride stayed with her family, the groom stayed with his family, and Monday morning she wanted to be divorced. And it was likely an annulment type situation. The wedding had not been consummated.
Oh, okay.
But somewhat with my years of experience, this is, let's just calm down.
Right, yeah, right.
I mean, what are the legal issues? You're very angry, very upset. Both sides of the family are warring.
Of course.
I can't go to court in any event tomorrow, which is what this woman wanted.
Right,
she
right.
wanted me, retain me on Monday and get her divorced on Tuesday.
Sure.
So that wasn't possible in any event. So it was easy for me to say, what are the legal issues and go through the process. And within a couple days, I learned that they had sorted out their issues.
Okay.
But they have my business card because they're not off to a great start.
Exactly, a little dodgy out of the starting gate.
Exactly.
Is an annulment then kind of a religious thing more than a legal thing? Do courts annul, or does the church annul a marriage?
The court does.
Oh, the court can too.
Oh,
Okay.
most certainly.
Oh, all right. Okay. All right. But it was just kind of a sidebar question. It just sort of popped into my mind. You were talking, though, moments ago about this young woman whose family called you up at 9 o'clock on Monday morning and wanted her divorced by Tuesday.
Yes.
So is this typical, Anna? Do people come there? What I'm aiming for is the emotional high. Not necessarily in a positive high either, that some people come into the office, they're pretty charged up. They've been through an enormous traumatic upheaval, and they are, in some cases, pretty angry. So how do you approach a client who comes to you in this sort of state of mind, extremely agitated, ready to go to war, out for blood, and let's get it done tomorrow?
I don't have a great deal of clients who meet that description.
Probably to your great relief, too, I'm sure.
But categorically, I would say 75% of people sit down, and somewhere within the first 5 minutes they say, I'm not out for blood, but. So I think the great fear is that when they first speak to a lawyer, they just perceive that family law lawyers will go to court and will be unrelenting in sort of taking litigation steps. They don't understand that we're more thoughtful people than that. But that's the image, I suppose, that family law lawyers have.
The gunslinger.
Yes, yeah.
Pitbull.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The pitbull gunslinger. And the greatest fear that the opposing party has is also the the lawyer. Like, what is my wife's or husband's lawyer going to do?
Right.
And so their greatest fear is often about the other lawyer.
Interesting. Mark, it's not always about court, though, is it? Court, it would strike me, would be the most expensive and probably the last resort for resolving these interpersonal disputes. So what other alternatives are there short of putting on the robes and the guns and heading into court, which, of course, you will do if push comes to shove, but you would prefer the other options, which are?
Well, the other options are mediation.
Okay.
Which is, and both Anna and I are mediators, family law mediators, and that's a very formal negotiation process involving a lawyer sitting as a mediator with the parties and maybe with lawyers representing the parties, and attempting to resolve issues, looking for commonalities in the positions of the parties, looking for what's reasonable as a way of resolving those sorts of cases. So
right.
that's a formal process. On a regular basis, though, even without being in mediation, we at our firm strive to find a way to resolve cases without going to court.
Okay.
And that it always, Sterling has sort of the same pattern of gathering information. So finding out what are the assets, what are the circumstances of children, sharing that information with the other side, and of course gathering information from the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a fact-finding part of this, and then there's a exchanging of positions. So what does each side want,
Mm-hmm.
and then identifying what are the positions where the people are at odds, and perhaps looking at what sort of compromises are possible.
Okay. Now, a mediation process, is this done? And when I hear mediation, I think of a guy like Vince Reddy, the legendary labor mediator. When we have a divorce situation where you have couples who are opposing each other, Anna, and they agree to mediation, is it supervised by a third party, a Vince Reddy type, obviously a lawyer, or do the lawyers for the husband and the lawyers for the wife organize and conduct the sessions themselves?
The official or more formalized mediation process has a third party mediator,
Okay.
and need not have two lawyers. So I mediate, generally speaking, with the parties, and the interesting thing about that is, as a family law lawyer, we hear our client's story, and then through a filter of the other lawyer or what have you, we hear the other story. But as a mediator, you hear both stories directly from
right.
both parties, and it's very interesting to compare the two. It's kind of quite an educative process, I have found.
I'm sure it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sometimes they didn't even attend the same movie, if I can put it that way.
The relationship was a completely different experience for both parties.
And it truly was.
Isn't that fascinating?
That's how they tell the story.
Was I really married to you? Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So in that case where you're the mediator and you have the two parties in front of you, if each of those people brings a lawyer with them, does that facilitate or complicate the process of mediation?
Depends on the lawyer, and it depends on the high degree of the degree of trust. If it's a high trust relationship where they're fairly close in their marital stories, and or very low trust where one party suspects the other one of, for example, not producing accurate financial information,
okay,
or complete financial disclosure,
mm-hmm.
or low trust also when they suspect that the other party has a hidden agenda. And it's surprising how often that hidden agenda is focused on support and or children.
Okay. So is the process then, Mark, because this is the first time children has come into the conversation at all so far. And clearly, and I must confess my bias here. When it comes to the resolution of disputes between adults, I save my emotions for the children. Mm-hmm. The grown-ups can work it out. They're
Yes.
big people. The kids, in many cases, are footballs. They get kicked around and pushed around and really have, in many cases, an awful time of it. Some cases, there are responsible parents who try to do the right thing and, generally speaking, pull it off. In other cases, the parents are so angry and there is so much acrimony, the children just become pawns in a really nasty game. And Anna, if you're in the middle of that, if you're the mediator, and someone's trying to use the children against the other party, you know, denying access or custody or whatever, or really ratcheting up the support numbers, how do you unravel that mess?
Well, there's a number of tools that we have. For example, if there's two lawyers involved, we can send the parties out of the room, have a confab with the two lawyers about how this is going down and the destructive impact.
Okay.
If there aren't lawyers, then I can step out and speak with one party, because we have license to be extremely frank.
Sure.
And of course, being parents and experienced family law lawyers, they generally seem to take our word.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's how you approach it, accusatory, angry, etc. That approach doesn't work, but more of a step back, educative nature approach.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do have another option, which is referring them to a parenting coach. They can each of them retain a parenting coach, which is the dual coaching method with a child specialist. And that's sort of a collaborative law overlay to mediation. But I'm not in a position to work through, otherwise I would lose my neutrality.
Right, of course.
So I have to maintain neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can send the parties out for parenting coaching, a few sessions of parenting coaching with a child specialist who meets with the children and can actually reflect back to the parents where their children are at. And so often when they hear that the children are not doing well because of this conflict, generally the parents then change their behavior.
Well, and one would hope. One would hope, because it's not a happy process for any kid, is it?
I want to weigh in on this and just tell you that no family law lawyers encourage parents to use children as footballs, okay, or encourage parents to take, strong positions vis-a-vis children that are very clearly not going to be in the children's best interest.
Fair enough.
Where the nuanced discussion is a parent saying, I need to do this because the other side is doing something else. It's the other side that is causing the anxiety or the upset for children.
Right.
And certainly in my practice and over my many years of doing this, often I have had discussions with clients. So my client and myself in my office, and I'm really telling my client this sort of conduct. I'm looking through what they're saying. I'm really parsing their thing.
Sure.
And basically saying, this isn't on.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to cause your child some difficulties here.
Right.
And one thing I've often said to clients is, going back to what we said before about the statistic of the amount of people that are divorcing or ending their relationships, is your children will go through what you're going through statistically.
Sure. Right.
And do you want them to have the same experience, same bitterness, same anger? Do you want your grandchildren to face the same thing? And if you do, well, then continue on in the same way. If you want them to have a different experience, then you better clean up your act.
Right. We'll talk more about the children and the emphasis the law places on protecting the interests of the children. Our guests are the founding partners from Westside Family Law. Mark Perry and Anna Perry are with us on this episode of The Law Show on CIL 650, with lots more still ahead after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.